Hello and welcome to this week's episode of We Used to Be Journos, the show where we unpack and analyse and quite often complain about the Australian media and indeed the media more broadly. My name is Jan Fran. I used to be a journo, but then I got very disillusioned with the profession that I love and am currently unemployed. And with me is my co-host Antoinette who also happens to be currently unemployed. Welcome.
I am unemployed, but I think a little bit of context is missing. I was sacked. Yes, and look, we do unpack and bitch and moan about our industry, but I think we do a bit more than that, Jan, because we also, we break stuff down and we give news consumers tips on how to tell if something stinks and what to do with it.
That's true.
Yeah.
We do. And that's the plan, to be doing that more and more as we move forward, because this is actually our sort of first, I'm not going to say proper episode, but the last two episodes were focused a little bit more on your trial and the verdict and the implications.
Yeah.
And this show is sort of a little bit of a departure from that, mercifully.
Yes. Excited about that. And I'm excited that we're still in number 1 on Apple News podcasts. We're still there. It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you to everybody who has listened and been listening and sent really lovely supportive messages. We're still getting them, and frankly, we love to hear them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what is on the show today?
Gosh, a huge one this week. So there's the newly appointed Anti-Semitism envoy, appointed about a year ago, and her report with recommendations and some curious things that stood out to us, and that pertains to her mandate to monitor and make recommendations on the media, which to me, low-key reads influence the narrative. So as well as talking about that, Jen, we're going to dig deeper, tracing the longer roots of pro-Israel lobbying in Australia, because to be honest, no other issue, no other story, no other lobby has bent the media ecosystem so out of shape. And we're not just speaking from the sidelines. This is not just speculation. We've been inside the industry for 2 decades watching this distortion in real time. And then we're going to go into It's a No From Me. That's our segment where we both bring something from the media that we have spotted that we think absolutely flunks the pub test. So that's where we have warm beer and cold takes.
Yes, but I should say that we're going to do that bit, the It's a No From Me, the BYO bad news, the no segment, as I like to call it. We're going to do that first, and then we're going to talk about the Anti-Semitism envoy and do the deeper dive into the Australian media.
Yeah.
And then, of course, look, we are going to finish it off with a good shout out to folks that are doing a good job that you should be following.
And I think that's to prove to ourselves as much as you that we aren't just bitter and unemployed.
Well, yes. Look, the unemployed one, we are, but the bitter one, that's up for debate. We're actually quite lovely people to hang out with. We're going to prove that to you at some point in this episode. Before we jump into all of that, though, there is one thing that I do need to address, which I'm a little surprised that we haven't already addressed.
Yes.
Which is why I keep getting questions about it. And it's a good question. And the question is, why have we decided to name our media company, because Antoinette and I started a media company, that's the BG. Why did we call it ET?
Yes, and it's et, not eti, not eta, not etai, as people have been suggesting.
Yes, it is ET Media, ETTE. And we called it that for a very specific reason, or a number of specific reasons. The first is that ET is an ode to, I guess, the two of us, because it's the last 4 letters of our first names. For those who don't know, my name is, unfortunately, Jeanette. And Antoinette's name is Antoinette, and they both end with ETTE. But Et is also a bit of a homage to the Lebanese aunties, because Et names are very, very common in the part of Lebanon where we come from, because it has this kind of just long tail colonial
French hangover.
Colonial French hangover. We love the French names. Nobody in France has been called these names since the 1700s approximately, but you'll find a lot of them in Lebanon.
Let's have a competition. Who has the most Et aunties? Because I have a lot of Ets in my family as well.
I have So my grandmother's name is Jeanette. My 2 aunties are Odette and Antoinette. My great aunties are Antoinette, Claudette, and Georgette.
Oh, good Lord.
And the outer aunties that I have are Mariette, Colette, Violette, Bernadette, and Juliet.
Okay, you win. I'm obviously Antoinette. I have an auntie Antoinette, an auntie Mariette, a sister-in-law Audette, a cousin Georgette, but that's it.
I mean, that's a reasonable amount of et. So there you go. That's what it was. It was a little bit of a homage to the aunties, to the Lebanese matriarchy. Also a bit of a kind of a tongue-in-cheek swipe at colonialism, and just an acknowledgement of the two of us and who we are.
That is us. Okay, let's start with It's a No from Me. And that's the part of the show where you bring your news done badly, it's a no, that sucks, or something that, raised our carefully manicured eyebrows.
Sure, I haven't manicured them in a few weeks. It's starting to resemble John Howard. Hopefully that's the only way that I resemble John Howard. But yes, can I go first with this one, please?
Go shoot.
I had a bunch of things that piqued my attention this week that I was tossing up what to bring. And then last night I saw something where I thought, okay, I think this is it. And it came to us courtesy of Chris Mitchell at The Australian, who wrote a column. And look, he's very mad about a lot of things, but about our podcast as well. We featured quite heavily in this column. And the column that he wrote was called Selective Context Key to How Journalists View Israel. Right. And he brought up our episode last week because we talked about The Age, the newspaper in Melbourne, needing to provide context to two particular incidents that he called attacks on Jewish people. But the two of them had direct links to the slaughter of Palestinians, which The Age neglected to mention in this particular piece. So we were like, can you please give the context?
And
anyway,
if you haven't listened to that episode, do, because it is excellent. Go on.
Well, and you're not the only one who thinks so. Or who thinks that people should listen to the episode. So I'm just going to pick some bits in the article.
Okay.
Where,
is Chris recommending our podcast?
I think he's hate recommending.
Oh, okay. We'll take that too.
People hate what? Hate
yeah,
listen.
sure. Okay. Thanks, Christopher.
Because he does say, readers interested in understanding how journalists think about Israel should listen to last week's discussion by Antoinette Latoufe and Jan Fran on their new weekly podcast, We Used to Be Journos. Mm-hmm. I mean, correct. You should.
You should listen. 5 stars. Yeah.
5 stars. And then he says both have Lebanese heritage.
Ooh.
Also true.
True.
But, I had a tiny alarm bell went off when I saw that. So I'm like, uh-oh, where's he going with this?
Well, at least The Australian recognises Lebanese heritage. But do go on.
They don't say it's a race, though.
Oh, yeah. Fair.
Indeed, we do both have Lebanese heritage. And then he goes on to say, presumably, neither would be happy if an Australian Lebanese restaurant was attacked by people blaming Australians of Lebanese heritage for 20 years of Hezbollah rocket attacks on northern Israel launched from inside Lebanon. So, no, we wouldn't be. He's kind of making this direct kind of comparison between the diners at the Miznon restaurant where the protesters stormed a week or so ago, and saying if it had been the other way around and if we were at a restaurant and that was stormed by people blaming Hezbollah for attacks on northern Israel, would we be happy?
Question.
Yes.
But is Hezbollah carrying out a plausible genocide and has been killing children, journalists, healthcare workers and aid care workers daily for almost 2 years? Did I miss that part?
No, that's not Hezbollah per se. I think that's Israel. Yeah,
okay.
No, not
just got
Hezbollah.
Confused. Okay.
Yeah. But that's the crucial context that was missing from Chris's piece.
Right.
So I thought, if he's going to call us out on missing context, then we should probably address his missing context to our missing context. And then he goes on to say, nor do they discuss the social media algorithms that magnify anti-Israel and anti-Semitic misinformation on platforms such as X and TikTok. That's true. We didn't discuss that specifically on the podcast because we were talking about the Age's editorial. That was a very specific discussion, but truly happy to. Very happy to discuss social media algorithms that magnify anti-Israel and anti-Semitic misinformation and also downplay pro-Palestinian narratives. We're happy to discuss all of it. Tune in.
Yeah.
Tune in. And then he goes on to say something that I thought was hilarious. Again, accusing us of leaving out much needed context. And the context was that neither of us mentioned a piece from Quillette editor Claire Lehman, published in this masthead.
So he wants us to read more of The Australian? Okay.
Not only does he want us to read more of The Australian, but he wants us to quote this particular article published by this particular person in The Australian about how the Soviet Union began a campaign to build anti-Israel sentiment globally as far back as 1967.
Christopher, what?
Why would we include that? It has no bearing on what we're talking about. We're talking specifically about the Age's editorial. Why would we? It just feels like, I mean, what do you want us to include next? A blog post about the terrible treatments of the Israelites under the Babylonians? What are you talking about?
What is he talking about?
We're just talking about one op-ed, Chris. But he's right. We did leave out that piece from Quillette, founding editor.
About the Soviet Union.
We did.
Our
we did.
apologies.
Yes.
Our apologies.
Next time we will cast the net far and wide. He also says that nor during discussion of the Age's story on Israeli Prime Minister and he's got in inverted commas and war criminal. You don't need to put the inverted commas, mate. He's certainly a wanted war criminal. And nor during the discussion of war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu's criticism of the Melbourne attacks do they give legal context that charges of genocide against him are contested by many countries that remain in contact with Netanyahu. Contested by whom?
Like Israel and Donald Trump?
Contested by Donald Trump. Contested by the man that is selling the weapons to Benjamin Netanyahu to
drop on children.
Yeah, and commit the genocide that he's accused of. Like, I reckon I'll take that one with a pinch of salt just quietly. Yep, thank you. Anything else? And then he says, while never excusing the synagogue fire, thanks for that.
Yeah.
True. The podcasters argue the Miznon and Lovett attacks were justified by the respective connections of each.
Not true.
Not
like,
true.
Blatantly not true.
I never said that the Miznon attack was justified. Look, if you're going to graffiti a weapons company, and I mean the graffiti that, as per reported by The Age, was anti-Israel graffiti on the wall of a weapons company, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over that.
Yeah.
But I never said the attack on the Miznon restaurant was justified.
Yeah.
The only thing that we asked was that The Age not link those incidents together, because they stoke fear and because it was a misrepresentation of two of the incidents, right? Not the attack on the synagogue, but the two incidents afterwards. And importantly, there's just no evidence that they were linked. Like The Age itself had reported that police had said there's no evidence that these events, incidents, attacks were linked. And yet The Age tacitly did that. And then kind of tacitly linked them to the protest movement, even though there's no evidence of that either. So we were just asking, like, don't link these events without evidence, please.
The only thing I would say, given he is making recommendations about us covering a study from the Soviet Union in whatever, about whatever, I'm going to make a little recommendations to him. Because the day that he decided to publish that strange take apart of our podcast, but hey, also listen to it, perhaps he could have covered, I don't know, the fact that Israel killed a bunch of children while they were lining up for water.
I was on the Australian's website this morning and there was no story about Gaza.
Yeah. Or, the fact that the IDF has created the largest cohort of paediatric amputees in history. I don't know, Christopher James Mitchell.
I don't think that's his name.
Maybe cover that.
Fair enough.
So it's a no from me. We all know that Albanese is in China. Or do you know that Albanese is in China? Yeah. He went to meet with Xi. But the commentary about that has taken off and took off well before Albanese's plane ever did. And what caught my attention is that there were eerily similar rhetoric coming from the coalition, as they were from tabloid outlets, as they were from other media outlets in their columns. And it's in terms of framing everything that Australia does in relation to China about how it might piss off the United States. And I just think that is pretty flat and it's pretty 2D way of looking at things. But I want to start with Sherry Markson on Sky News because she kind of helps paint the picture or set the tone. And last week she was really not happy that Albanese had the audacity to meet with our neighbour and our largest trading partner.
This is truly astonishing that he's about to meet Chinese President Xi for the fourth time, while he still hasn't managed to secure a single meeting with the US president. The pair, in fact, have never met, despite Trump winning the election on November 4th. 8 months ago, 8 months.
I'm sorry, on November what?
4th. On November 4th, 8 months ago.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop it there, just for a wee bit of fact-checking and context. Like, it is true that Trump hasn't met with Albanese, but not for want of trying, because it was Trump's decision to leave the G7 meeting. Like, he left it early last month, if you recall, in the midst of, Israel and Iran
and
firing rockets together.
Yes.
And that, consequently, that meant that was a missing of the first meeting with Albanese.
Yeah. Also, I think this is Albanese's first visit to China since being re-elected, right? And the other times were during his first term when Biden was president. So
yeah, this is his second term. So
yeah, when you say he's never met with Trump, it's well, he kind of wasn't the prime minister when Trump was the president.
Yeah, and
so
the fourth time is misleading because yes, he met with Xi, but this is his second term.
Sure.
Anyway, she continues.
And the prime minister seems to find every excuse for China's intimidation of our country.
Of our country.
Of our country. Anyway, so it's easy to ride this off as a kind of another episodic moral panic, but it's this US and China binary that I've seen time and time again in the framing of Albanese's visit to China. And so I guess my points are that reducing an entire diplomatic relationship to a few penciled in meetings that didn't happen, I think it's simplistic. But also, Trump, for what it's worth, is also so unpopular with Australians. There was some research that came out of the Lowy Institute recently that found that 72% of Australians have either no confidence or very little confidence in him as a leader. And more than half have said that they have no confidence in him at all. So 55% said. So I doubt Australians right now are quickly, it's a panic that doesn't resonate, I think, with the broader Australian public.
Yeah.
But also shouldn't be linked to us meeting with and developing a relationship and managing our own geopolitical situation and economy independent of
Are you suggesting that the Australian media can't report on China unless it's with some level of breathless indignation?
Yes.
Look,
this is before he even got there. There was all these articles before it even arrived there.
Yeah.
And so I just want, I guess, our listeners and our viewers to be mindful when they're consuming some of the coverage of while he's there, to note some of this kind of breathlessness and moral panic and binary, and to try and question it.
So the breathlessness, we probably can tone it down a little bit. And it wasn't just with Sky. There seems to be some kind of contagion with breathy reporting around China because it pops up elsewhere.
Yeah, and there were so many articles across many outlets. So I've picked one, and this is a column in the AFR that jumped out at me as particularly reductive. The headline: Albanese lost in translation as he heads to Beijing. And immediately I thought, ooh, translation, another language. And then the subheading is...
This is not an Australian adjacent country that speaks English.
China.
FYI. Yeah.
The Prime Minister is sending a confused message on Australia's relationship with the US. The contradictions will be even sharper in his visit to China. This is the first paragraph. Timing and imagery matter in politics. It may be a coincidence that Anthony Albanese's visit to Beijing this weekend is uncomfortably close to yet another supposed Trump deadline for tariff and trade deals this week. So the piece opens with hedging. It may be a coincidence, a supposed headline.
A supposed deadline.
Sorry, a supposed deadline, but still runs with the same implication. It just reinforces that patronising frame.
Is it a coincidence that Anthony Albanese is going to China at the same time as this kind of slightly movable maybe deadline? I don't know, but I'm just going to put it at the top of my piece anyway. Let's speculate.
Absolutely. And, it places Australia as though we're a diplomatic toddler and we're trailing behind the grown-ups, and our foreign policy moves largely reactively or symbolically, and this kind of analysis downplays our agency and it simplifies a complex geopolitical balance that Australia has to make. They are our largest trading partner. They are our neighbour. We live in the Asia Pacific. We are, and it's not about a game of let's not upset Uncle Donald.
Ugh, can you not call him that?
Why not?
No, call him Donald Trump. I don't want any nicknames being dished out to that man.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I accept that.
I have to catch myself, like, even with our prime ministers, like Albo. No,
Okay.
he does not get called Albo.
Okay.
He's Anthony Albanese. Anyway, side note. Can I just like push back a little bit on the kind of media rhetoric around like, are we friends with China?
Sure.
We're friends with, like,
Don't just push back on what I call people. Push back on that too. Go. Go.
You hate me. So, I mean, I don't know whether we should. I have no opinion on any like of our geopolitical ties and relationships. I do not earn enough money to make any pronouncements. Right. However, I'm just thinking about like the media narrative. The PM did sort of set a bit of a tone like earlier this month because he gave this key speech where he invoked John Curtin, and you know John Curtin is the PM that's known for sort of moving us away from Britain more towards the United States because we wanted to assert slightly more independence from Britain, and that was seen as our national interest, as being in our national interest. So Albanese invoking John Curtin, talking about what's in our national interest, moving us away from a player that we were previously aligned with that maybe no longer serves our national interest. Like, of course the media is going to run with this narrative of like, hang on, what is happening here globally? Are we moving away from the United States? Are we moving closer to China? The bells are ringing. And, you know, like we love to speculate. Our profession loves a good old bit of speculation, and he's like thrown the dog a bone in a sense.
Fair. We do love to speculate, but there are like many big and real issues that I think are more pressing.
Sure.
Like trade, tourism, the release of Chinese Australian blogger Yang Hengjun, who remains in prison accused of spying. There are so many other things to cover in the context of Australia and China. And I think this opinion piece in Crikey, written by Wanning Sun, she is the Deputy Director of the Australia-China Relations Institute and a Professor of Media and Communications at UTS. She put it well. She says, in reality, diplomacy, especially for a middle power in a multipolar Asia-Pacific, requires managing tensions, not choosing sides. The Albanese government is trying hard to manage the US-China tension while engaging with both powers where interests align, example, trade with China, security with the US. But clearly this is not good enough for our conservative media and coalition politicians.
Well said, Wanning Sun. Yeah, I'm glad we ended with that. Is there someone calling for like, can we just be sensible a little bit? And the answer is no. No, Wanning, we can't. Do you know anything about the media? Absolutely not. We're going to continue to speculate and beat the drums. I look forward to it. We're going to move on now to talk about the big story of the last week pertaining to the Australian media. And that is Australia's anti-Semitism envoy, Jill Segal, and her plans for the Australian press, namely the public broadcasters, and also, you know, various elements of social media. We're going to talk a little bit about why we find this plan a little bit alarming, and then we're going to talk about, I guess, the kind of broader context within which some of these recommendations come, right? Yeah. So here is the background. On Thursday, there was a press conference with the Prime Minister and Jillian Segal, who is our anti-Semitism envoy, because she was releasing a report that she's been compiling for some months now.
Yeah, and there were heaps of recommendations, including strengthening legislation on intimidating protest activity, that's a quote, tougher screening of visa applications for anti-Semitic views, withholding or terminating funding to universities, academics and arts organisations that promote anti-Semitic conduct or fail to act against it, increase education of anti-Semitism in school curriculums, and this is what we're most interested in, obviously, and the plans to, quote, monitor media organisations to avoid accepting false or distorted narratives.
Yes, that is the last one is the one that we are going to focus on, because that's the one that is most relevant to, I guess, us and what we do here at this podcast. But I mean, that list that you just rattled off, some pretty sweeping reforms there. Like, you're talking about changes and or tweaks to the curriculum. You're talking about possibly defunding universities. And all of this comes on the backdrop of a particular definition of anti-Semitism, which I'm not going to get into too much. It's called the IHRA definition. But it has a lot of critics who say that particular definition, if you adopt that as the foundation for all of these recommendations, which is what this report has done, then you run the risk of conflating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism and with criticism of Israel, right? That's the criticism of this particular definition. So you're talking about quite sweeping reforms under a specific definition that is, at the
Problematic
very least,
at best.
Yeah, or like controversial, problematic.
So throughout the entire press conference, which went for about half an hour, Gaza was mentioned once by Albanese, referring to aid getting into Gaza. Not a single person said the word Palestine. Genocide was mentioned once in a question by an AAP journalist who asked a two-pronged question. Now, the first was about social cohesion, and the second one was this.
And the second question that I had, comments regarding Marco Rubio's sanctions of Francesca Albanese's scathing report of Israel called the economy of genocide. Thoughts on
on social cohesion.
Okay, so that reporter asked, his second question was about Marco Rubio, who is the US Secretary of State, I can't remember exactly his title, had sanctioned Francesca Albanese, the UN official, who'd written, as the journo said, a very scathing report of Israel called The Economy of Genocide. And the journo was asking the Prime Minister's thoughts on that report. Now, this is relevant for a number of reasons. One, this is the second question that the reporter asked, right? So Albanese does answer his first question, which is about social cohesion. We're not going to play it here because it was a little bit of a nothing answer. And then starts to kind of move away and ask the room for other questions, right? But the journo presses him to answer his second question. And this is how it sounded in the room.
But to raise it.
Can I
and on
just
Marco
add,
Rubio's sanctions against Francesca
can I
Albanese?
just add one comment though?
Okay, can we stop there for a second?
Yeah.
So you heard the journo, right? And
Yes.
on Marco Rubio's sanctions against Francesca Albanese,
Which is the most critical question of Israel throughout the whole press conference.
indeed. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you will not have seen the very fleeting moment that we're about to refer to, but we will have it up on our YouTube video if you're watching this on YouTube.
And I'm going to reenact it.
No, it was more like it was a real like kind of talk to the hand from the Prime Minister.
He swatted it
He
physically.
swatted the question away.
Yeah, and he made it sound and swatted it with his hand.
He was almost just very perturbed that he had been asked to, answer this. He'd been given a follow-up to the question that he didn't answer. Coming back to the issue of the anti-Semitism envoy and the impact on the media, let's put the malarkey and the shenanigans of the press conference aside. The report says specifically that anti-Semitism was being driven by conflict in the Middle East, manipulated narratives in the legacy media and social media, and the spread of extremist ideologies. So she wants, I guess, a monitoring role for the media, and she was asked specifically about this on 7:30, and here is what she said.
You say you want to have a role monitoring the ABC and holding the ABC and other public, another public broadcaster, SBS, to account on, quote, avoiding false or distorted narratives. What false or distorted narratives do you have in mind?
I don't have anything in particular in mind.
Well,
I think,
let me just stop you
plan-
there. Let me just stop you there, Jillian. You must have something in mind to have asserted that you want a role monitoring something.
Okay, so my first point of call with that is if you have a problem with a manipulated media narrative, but you don't have a particular example in mind, well, that makes me question either your full understanding of the problem or the way in which the recommendations are going to be applied, because it seems quite vague to me.
Yeah, I think vague is what it is.
Vague is what it is. But anyway, she was pressed on it, and here is what she said about the plan.
I think the plan is an ambitious plan to tackle all the important elements of our society where there can be the issues of anti-Semitism that need to be pushed to the margins. Now, ABC and SBS are very important elements in our society, public broadcasters that many people watch and that are seen as important and trusted sources of news. And I think that they are important elements of communication that need to be looked at and encouraged to look at multiple sources of truth rather than one particular view.
What does multiple sources of truth mean?
I couldn't get past the plans and margins and segments and elements.
Well,
it felt like a periodic table.
It felt, again, I just come back to that question of it felt quite vague. And Sarah Ferguson, to her credit, kind of kept pressing her on it and said, you know, like we want kind of these concrete recommendations, not these grand motherhood statements. But just coming back to like multiple sources of truth, it did sound to me, and I don't know if I'm being unfair here, but it did sound to me like alternative facts. Like the truth is the truth. How do you get multiple sources of truth? Anyway, like I said, she was pressed on it a number of times. She didn't give one example in that particular interview, but she did say, I will be looking for balance. Which again was another little alarm bell just ringing there in my head, because I know the way that balance
it plays out. Like, no, we didn't do it. This is a genocide. No, it is not. You killed this. No, we did not. See, balance. We went and we got their perspective.
Well, I mean, the question is like, how exactly does balance play out in the midst of a genocide?
Yeah,
like that is a question really for the media to reckon with.
Yeah, and to be fair, Steve Kinane, ABC RN, who is an excellent journalist in my opinion, he did also interview Segal, and then he pressed her for specific examples, and this is what she gave.
So, 6 months ago or so, the ABC to give one case study, and I'm not trying to focus just on the negatives because I think that there's a lot that the ABC can do that's very constructive to try and build cohesion. But the ABC ran a story repeatedly about a hospital in Gaza that had been bombed, and there was incomplete information, as there is, only perhaps information emanating from Hamas, but it was alleged to be, but the ABC reported it as fact, that it had been bombed by Israel. And then, horrified, people were upset, and the Jewish community was looked at with disgust and worse. And then it turned out, indeed, that it was not bombed by Israel, but had been from Gaza itself, and it had been a bomb that had fallen short, and
I remember that case, I remember it being the BBC. I don't remember the ABC.
No, the
reporting
ABC
that.
reported it in great detail repeatedly, and then the correction, as always, is very, very, very small, just once off. But the impression is left that the Israelis bombed that hospital.
Okay. So she's talking there about a particular incident. The SMH had a breakdown of the incident that she's talking about. It's a bombing that happened in October of 2023. It was breaking news.
I remember,
Yeah, the ABC updated the story 25 minutes after it was uploaded to include Israel's denial. I think they took the X/Twitter post that they had put up saying it was an Israeli bombing. I think they took that down. The ABC says that particular story was investigated and cleared by the Ombudsman.
But
right?
not good enough for the envoy.
Well,
presumably not.
Well, presumably not. I mean, if she's brought that up as an example, then she must think that more needs to be done. So my question is, what more needs to be done, and in what ways will the more that needs to be done be implemented?
Yeah, I think there was a couple of things that I think could have been. There was a bit of a missed opportunity to further press her on that. She made a comment about, then Jewish people are looked at in disgust. I mean, that's again the conflation of the actions of a military, or the supposed actions of a military, and just going, the assumption that people who are upset by that are not upset by the military. They're looking at the Jewish people in disgust.
Well, okay. Yeah.
And I think that's a little unfair.
Well, I mean, you could be a Jewish person and feel as though somebody is looking at you and your community in disgust, and that is a real and valid feeling. Like, I'm not going to take that away from people.
Oh, that's a subjective feeling, but saying it as an objective fact, I think is, But the bigger facts that could have potentially been pushed back is that Israel has continued to attack and bomb healthcare sites and workers. 120 ambulances have been completely destroyed. Countless hospitals have been bombed, so much so that there is not a zero hospital that is fully functioning.
Yeah.
And more than 1,000 healthcare workers have been killed. So
I know. Look, I have to say, like, as a
it's just
listener,
like,
as just someone that was just listening to that particular part of the interview, there was this thing in my mind where it's like, okay, yep, Israel didn't bomb that hospital. It did bomb every other hospital, though.
yes.
Yeah. No, not that specific one, but no, all the others it
So it's
did.
just like, so
it just felt
the
quite
impression
jarring.
that is left. So the impression that is left is that, we bombed the hospital. Well, you bombed all the other ones. So
I mean, there's a reason why people
Have
have that impression because, unfortunately, it does happen to come from a rather horrific reality. But speaking of kind of media manipulated narratives, I think it would be remiss of us not to mention reporting by the Claxton, which is an independent media outfit just at the weekend. They reported that Jillian Segal's husband is the second highest donor, $50,000, to Advance Australia. So his family trust gave
a discretionary trust
gave money in 2024 to, like, how would you describe Advance Australia? Like
completely wacky.
Okay, yep, that's one way to do it.
Like right-wing anti-immigration, anti-Indigenous voice, anti-trans people, anti-welcome to country.
Yeah, just real kind of
really
peddlers
divisive right-wing.
Yeah, very divisive, right-wing peddlers of this kind of very populist, toxic culture war. Very bad for social cohesion, in my humble estimation.
Yeah. She did. Seagull then came out and released a statement, not to Claxton, which did the original reporting, even though I'm aware of the fact that she was given 48 hours notice, or 48 hours to reply. She was asked specifically about these donations. She was asked if she was named on the deed of trust. The only way to know if she is also part of this trust is to get the deed. Most discretionary trusts are family trusts. So it is imagined that she is also on this, but she has not clarified whether she is or she isn't. But she released a statement saying, "No one would tolerate or accept my husband dictating my politics, and I certainly won't dictate his. I have and had no involvement in his donations, nor will I."
Okay, and I think to some extent that's fair enough. Like, some people have very different politics in a marriage or whatever it is. Tony Burke has come out and he has supported her, saying that, like, we wouldn't expect a woman to buy into everything that her husband does these days, or, whatever it was. I don't know. She says she has no involvement. Okay, let's just take her on her word. The most relevant thing here for me, and, when we talk about the media, is that, like, if you go to Advance's website, right? Let me just give you one example. There is an article called "Mass Immigration is a Threat to Australia." Okay, surprise! And of course, they're talking about Muslim immigration.
How do you know that?
It becomes very clear very quickly. So there is an AI-generated image on that article of, like, this horde of men in dark outfits, in backpacks, these matching black outfits, just marching towards a city in the distance, right? And that is literally the definition of manipulated media. So my question is, like, how seriously are we to take a person who talks about stamping out manipulated media narratives that adversely impact a religious minority when that person's husband is the second highest donor to an outfit that regularly manipulates media narratives that affect a religious minority?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I feel like if we had a bell, we'd be, like, ringing it right now.
Well, that's called an alarm bell.
Yeah,
and I
feel like we need one.
Those alarm bells are certainly ringing. And I guess my question is, like, okay, you had nothing to do with that donation, sure, but what are your thoughts on that donation?
Do you condemn that donation? Do you condemn their stance? Because also on their social media posts from Advance, specifically relating to Palestine, just last week they had, "Who would have thought bringing hundreds of people from Gaza would be a risk to security?" That was in relation to a woman who had her visa cancelled. They've also said, "If you chant globalize the intifada on the street, you should be deported. End of story." So that is a reference to protests.
Yeah,
so
I feel like Jillian Segal should just be media monitoring her husband.
Yeah.
Like, before media monitoring the public broadcaster. Like, just start there for a second and then move up.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And obviously this is pretty concerning, and if I had a bell, I'd be ringing it right now on its own. So like claims, that, how much can we trust this envoy's recommendations on media narratives, given what you've just explained. But also those recommendations and that report was made without the Jewish Council of Australia. They weren't invited to contribute. So those groups that were invited to contribute are overtly pro-Israel or Zionist. And also, Segal is the immediate past president of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, which is very publicly supportive of Israel and its actions. And so, I guess that's another, forget the husband who is an alarm bell. This is a bit of another alarm bell for me.
Well, I think it just, civil liberties groups and, other groups have, I think, concerns rightly that this is going to stifle criticism of Israel. The envoy has said, well, no, it won't stifle criticism of Israel. But then to see that the Jewish Council, which is an organisation that is overtly critical of Israel, wasn't consulted. And I've spoken to somebody at the Jewish Council, and they've said that, they weren't approached to be part of the report at all. I mean, one of the mandates of the envoy is to highlight diverse Jewish Australian identities, and yet one of the key Jewish bodies, and I grant you it may not be representative of the community, that's yes, it may be just a small part of the community, but it's part
of the community,
and it's growing, and it's sort of responding to this moment, and yet it wasn't approached at all. And I guess, coming back again to journalism and the media, I sort of worry a little bit about the envoy's plan, not just because I find it vague, or that because certain Jewish groups that are critical of Israel weren't consulted, or that the envoy was a former, I guess, pro-Israel lobbyist herself, or that her husband donates to just a wildly sensationalist and dishonest
racist
media outfit. I guess the kind of concern that I have is that it's sort of all of this is landing in an ecosystem that I think has already been influenced by the pro-Israel lobby. And I only say this because it's like your case was a perfect demonstration of that. I know we don't really need to go into that, but it was sort of like the first time that it's like, oh, a judge has made a connection between pro-Israel lobbyists and media outlets capitulating to their cause.
Yes, and that was a really a big, important legal moment, but also one for the broader public, I think, to come along. And if perhaps they weren't as well versed on things happening behind the scenes as you and I are about to get into, it was a very public moment in something that we know has been permeating our industry for decades. And so junkets they're essentially sponsored tours, so that journalists and editors are sent on. They're usually funded by pro-Israel groups, or funded at least in part by the Jewish Board of Deputies or the Australian Israel Jewish Affairs Council, AJAC, and it's where journalists and newsroom heads are given state-sponsored tours of Israel.
Yeah, like educational tours, learning tours, yeah.
And there is quite a comprehensive list collated by Crikey that was last updated October 2024 by media writer Danny Said. So if you want the comprehensive list of exactly who has been on these media tours and when, head there, but includes the current editor of The Guardian, the ABC's political editor of The Time, SMH editor, the current Age editor, the Daily Telegraph editor, SBS's current managing editor, a bunch of Sky News reporters and presenters, the Australian's chief political correspondent, he went last year, News Corp's national political editor, 7 News reporters. The list goes on and on.
It does go on. There's about 86 just on this list alone. It's not by all means an exhaustive list, but 86 journalists and media figures on that list. Comparatively, how many have taken a Palestinian junket to the occupied West Bank and or Gaza?
A handful, or 6 actually, but no trips have been taken since 2016, whereas there were people going late last year and early this year, still going to Israel on media state-sponsored tours. So this is in the context of the deadliest assault on journalists, Palestinian journalists, since the Committee to Protect Journalists formed more than 30 years ago. And also, I think it's important to note, it's at a time where Israel has denied access to foreign independent journalists entering Gaza, but creates these curated tours to the other side of the border of the occupying power.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. I've always thought these things were wild. I've known about them for a very long time. I know people who've been on them. I have friends that were asked to go on them. And there will be excuses galore from the media.
I've never been asked to go on one. Have you been asked to go on one?
No, I haven't.
Curious.
I probably wouldn't, to be fair.
No, I know I wouldn't.
But like, you know, you hear the excuses all the time. Like junkets happen all the time, and not just by the pro-Israel lobby. Like, you know,
Qantas or whatever.
Yeah, Qantas. Samsung will fly someone overseas to look at their unveiling of their new product or whatever it is. Like, yeah, they are always declared, or they at the very least they should be.
Generally speaking, though, public broadcasters say no to a lot of junkets.
Well, I'm pretty sure that ABC staff don't go on those tours anymore. But if anybody has information to the contrary, please contact me, because I haven't followed that up. But you know, the excuse is always that like we go into these things open-eyed. We know exactly what these things are, and I do believe that journalists are like cynical, critical people. Right?
By and large.
Yeah, maybe that's a gracious interpretation. I know like disclosures are made and that we have final editorial say and whatever. But here's like the managing director of SBS just from last year at an internal staff meeting that was recorded. He was questioned by his staff about these junkets and about whether it was, you know, fair and wise to do, and about whether he would go again. And this is what he said.
My judgment was, as the editor-in-chief that covers that territory of the world a lot, I was better to go and see it with my own eyes than I was to stay here and make assumptions about it having not seen it. I understand the perception risk around it. I probably wouldn't go now if presented with the opportunity again, because the circumstances have changed, and I am nervous about the perception that creates on all the incredible work that you do every day.
So these are the sorts of kind of questions that media bosses have had to reckon with their staff. This is just one example. There's a lot in this that I just don't buy, really. The idea that I was better to go and see it with my own eyes than I was to stay here and make assumptions about it. First of all, you don't have to make assumptions. You can just go off the body of evidence, as you do for all the various other parts of the world that we cover.
We don't visit everything.
Yeah.
We don't visit everywhere.
And
yeah.
that SBS reports, you know, about, you'd like to think, like impartially and fairly and accurately and truthfully. So you don't have to make assumptions. And two, like if you want to go and see it with your own eyes, you make $1 million a year, mate. You can go and see it. You can pay your own way there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't have to go on anyone's dime. Like you can go every year if you want to.
Yeah. And also, if you really want to go see it for your own eyes, go see it all for your own eyes. Don't just go to one side, which is the occupying side.
Yeah,
I mean, the side with the power.
Yeah.
And the second largest military in the world. You know, like I don't really think that's seeing it all for your own eyes. The thing that stuck out for me was I probably wouldn't go now. That's not a straight out no. That's a, I don't want to say I would, but I don't want to say I wouldn't. That's how I heard it.
Well, look, I reached out to James and I asked him if, you know, he would ban SBS employees from going on these junkets in the future. And I did get a response back from his media person, and she said, well, this is something that we have discussed previously before, and we kind of have nothing further to add. But I don't think that they've specifically answered that question of whether or not they will ban their staff from going on, you know, junkets paid for by the pro-Israel lobby to Israel.
And like as we said, there are a whole bunch of journos and presenters that have been from across a range of outfits. This is not just about SBS.
I'm not out here just trying to single out James. I know that you say that, you know, he's like the top guy at SBS, it's a multicultural broadcaster, all the rest of that. Like, I think he's, you know, at the very least, he's reckoned with this question with his staff and also publicly. And there have been many leaders of media companies that have not done that and have, from what I have heard, kind of shut down a lot of the discussion around that. But I just want to give like people a bit of a picture of the lay of the land in Australian journalism, because now what we have is this situation where the upper echelons of Australian journalism, and I'm talking the editor of the SMH, the editor of The Age, the editor of The Guardian, ABC, Daily Telly, SBS, The Australian, they have all been on Israeli lobby-funded trips to Israel. Now, imagine for a second if the upper echelons of Australian journalism had all been on Chinese lobby-funded trips
Oh my gosh.
to China.
We just talked about Chinese. They'd have a conniption. They wouldn't even know how to cover it. Everybody would be. There'd be so much moral panic. There'd just be people like laying on the floor, passing out. They just would not know what to do with themselves.
It wouldn't happen, basically. It would never happen. You would never have this scenario. I don't think you would even have a scenario where the upper echelons of Australian journalism have all been on US lobby-funded junkets to the US.
Yeah.
Like, that would be weird.
Yeah.
And yet you have a situation where they've all been on Israeli lobby-funded trips to Israel. And I know
And
that...
all hold really senior positions.
And all hold really senior positions. So they've built the relationships with the lobbyists. They've gone and spent time in the country and felt an affinity with it. And literally there's journalists who know that this is an endeavour to target their hearts and minds. They will come back
And
from the
say
trip
it.
and say...
This has captured my heart and my mind. It's like, oh, bro, you're saying the quiet bit out loud. But some of the quieter conversations, I've been told by a former news director at a major television network, that if these lobbyists were unhappy with particular coverage, they would go beyond him or her and go straight to more senior people who had been on these trips. So they also had, as a result of going, direct access. Like the lobbyists had direct access to go, we're not happy with that coverage. We've got this person on speed dial.
Wait a minute, pro-Israel lobbyists having direct access to powerful people in the no, doesn't sound familiar at all. No.
And so then that's the people with more power at the higher end of town in media. Then there are the plebs, right? The plebs, like us, the working journos, a bunch of us.
Yeah. I guess you can count us as plebs, or maybe we're just like that pathetic middle.
Yeah. That's it. We're even worse.
Yeah, we're
even
shit.
worse,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so 270 of us plebs. Apologies if those other signatories don't consider themselves plebs.
I think even more, but go on.
Yeah, so at
somebody
least
check the number
270.
of the final signatories.
Yeah. In December 2023, we signed a petitions, and people from a range of outlets and from a range of different kind of religious backgrounds, Jewish journalists included, and we wanted to raise alarm as to the coverage that we will see. So this is December 2023. And some of the things we asked for, as reporters, editors, photographers, producers, and other workers in newsrooms around Australia, we are appalled at the slaughter of our colleagues and their families and apparent targeting of journalists by the Israeli government.
Remember, this is in December 2023.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So obviously concern for our journalist colleagues. We also call for Australian newsroom leaders to be as clear-eyed in their coverage of the atrocities committed by Israel as they are of those committed by Hamas.
Yes, and what that meant was that the suffering, the immense human suffering, not be minimised, and that we kind of apply the same professional skepticism when prioritising or relying on uncorroborated Israeli government and military sources to shape the coverage, as it is to Hamas. So just think of the top level of skepticism that you could have as a journalist, apply it equally.
Yeah. And humanising Palestinians, which is something that's...
Yes.
Yeah,
So
included in that.
But what has been, I guess I will use the word interesting because I don't really know a better way to describe it, but was the incredibly swift, harsh, public, unilateral response from all of these media organisations whose editors have all been on these lobby-funded trips to Israel, by the way.
And remain tight-lipped about it, to your earlier point.
Yeah. Was just the kind of like clamp down on journalists.
Yeah,
they were told,
we all got put in the naughty corner.
Basically.
Yeah.
All the journalists at Nine got told that if they signed that letter, their impartiality had come into question. Okay, that's interesting for wanting better reporting on Israel and Palestine, but not the impartiality of the editors, obviously, who'd been on these junkets and frolicked around in the Dead Sea and had a great old time.
Yeah.
The journalists were told that they were not allowed to report.
And they still aren't. Many at the Age and SMH still tell me that that blanket ban from December 2023 remains in place today.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I know this to be the case at other media organisations that I won't name, is they have a sort of a similar policy where you can't put your name on the work, but you still do the work. So you're trusted to do the work. They trust you to do that, to do all of the grit, to do all of the writing, to do all of the research, to do all of the interviews, to compile the work, but you just can't put your name on it, which feels a lot more pathetic to me.
Yeah,
honestly.
So there's some like overt punishment and red lines drawn, but a whole bunch of more sort of covert things happening. The other thing that's happening is we know an exodus of many journalists who signed that petition
Yeah, because like they probably found the newsroom suffocating, and because it's almost 2 years down the track of seeing atrocity after atrocity after atrocity after atrocity, and this like unspeakable level of human suffering.
Yes.
And watching their media organizations just flail in the reporting of it truthfully and accurately.
Yeah, and this kind of brings me back to our initial point. Journos mobilising and petitioning being silenced, punished or quitting. And again, all of these actions, whether it's the junkets, whether it's the envoys, whether it's the treatment of those who sign a petition calling for better journalism, it is unlike anything, any other topic. It's not comparable to any other foreign nation or even a domestic issue.
No.
This is particular to the coverage of Israel.
Yeah. And I just will, before we wrap up, because I feel like, okay, we've covered it, we've gone a bit long on this, but one funny thing that stood out to me was when the open letter was signed, the Guardian kind of came down on their staff and said, well, you can't sign any more open letters, right? No more open letters. They put a clause or something in there.
SBS aren't allowed to sign letters.
Yeah, but
I'm told.
The point with the Guardian is that if at the time, which I believe was in early 2024, let me just 100% double check this, but if you went on the Guardian's editor-in-chief's Twitter feed, right, Catherine Viner, who had just, handed down this direction of no more open letters, the last tweet that she's made was her signing an open letter.
Just on a different topic.
Just on a completely different topic.
Yeah, that's...
So it's like, it was almost like quite
hilarious,
comical and bewildering, and I guess.
And soul destroying and everything in between.
Yeah, and that's why we used to be journos.
Okay, so not to not leave you on that incredibly depressing note, we are going to give a quick shout out to something that caught our eye, something that deserves a thumbs up. For me,
who is it's a yes from me?
Yeah,
who is your it's a yes?
It's a yes from me. Cartoonist Jess Harwood. She published this excellent cartoon. So on the left-hand side, the text says, one woman guilty of murder via mushrooms, and there is a huge media scrum outside Latrobe Valley Court, and there's also like podcasters there. And on the right... and on the left, you've got the entire Northern Territory Police Force bears the hallmarks of institutional racism, and that led to the death of Kumanjai Walker. That's the text. And then you see the NT Coroner's Court and absolutely no press outside of that.
Right. So making a point on what captures the media's attention versus what doesn't get coverage.
Doesn't. And that's Jess Harwood. If you want to see that cartoon, we've actually got it up on @Media's Instagram. And you also give Jess a follow. She's excellent.
Yes. It's a yes from me. I'm just going to go to Anthony Clan from the Claxton. We mentioned him earlier, the independent site that I won't say broke the news of Seagulls' husband's advance donations, because it had already, I saw it in The Guardian, but it was buried at the bottom of an article. This was some months ago. But this particular report did put the donation front and centre, and I think it did so at the right time, particularly given Segal was talking about manipulated media narratives. And then, she was kind of forced to come out and make a comment despite ignoring Anthony for 2 days.
2 days, and I love the follow-up. His follow-up article even more, because the headline was Special Envoy Jillian Segal, who is seeking to dictate the nation's speech and media reporting, says she won't, quote, dictate to her husband over $50,000 given to the far-right group Advanced.
Well, there you go. A bit of a spicy headline there from Anthony Clan at the Claxton, but an independent news site. And you know what? I'm gonna spruik independent media over and over
all
and
day,
over again,
every day,
because it's
most
so important.
Days.
We're not the only ones doing it. So your support is very, very, very valued. And on that note, if you do want to support us, please go to etmedia.com. And hit that subscribe button, baby.
Yes.
We will talk a little bit more about that, I think, in the coming weeks. But that is just to allow us a little bit of time to build this podcast, to build our platform, and to do a bunch of other things that are in the works as well.
And before you go, if you love this episode, please share it with somebody. Give it 5 stars. We love to read your reviews. Hit follow on app so we land straight into your feed every week. If you prefer YouTube, you can subscribe on YouTube. We Used to Be Journos is part of Et Media, and that is our new independent media company, which we'll tell you more about in coming weeks.
Yes, absolutely. A massive thanks to our team. We do have one that makes this podcast, and a big shout out, as always, to Jai Pine, who is our composer. He's great. We love him. We love everyone. We love you. See you next week.